the publication of Paraja, first by Oxford University Press and then by Faber in UK, translation of Odia literature into English ceased to be an amateurish, self-funded activity, and it came to be recognized as a task demanding a high degree of professionalism, sensitivity, and commitment. Times Literary Supplement carried a very favorable review of this translation. New standards were set, and translators like me and many others, like Ekalabya, sought to learn the art of translation from Professor Bikram Das without, of course, having to sacrifice our thumbs. Professor Das is unlike Dronacharya, is a most willing and generous mentor. The silence about translators, while talking about the need for translation, intrigues me and seems symptomatic of a serious malaise. The need for translation is so obvious that a debate about it appears irrelevant.
I must say this is the largest audience I've ever been in front of when it comes to translation. Is translation necessary? Should translators be transparent? None of us is transparent, that's for sure. Is translation necessary? I'll just look at it from two different sides of the picture. One, from publishers' point of view, do publishers need translations? Because that, after all, is the medium through which translations will get out to readers. And two, do Indian readers need translations? I have a bone to pick with people who set our academic curriculum. Many of you here will have read English literature in college, right? How many people read English literature in college? Lots of us did. And what did we read in college as English literature? We read English literature, right? Did we read any Indian literature as part of our English literature courses? Almost never. We read French, we read Spanish, we read German. Our professors told us about the great literatures of the world. Did they tell us about Indian literature? Did any of you get to hear about Indian literature? About literature from Odisha, from Bengal, from Karnataka, from Tamil Nadu? No. In colleges, people, when these reading habits are formed, there is no way in which students get to read the literature of their own country. And I really honestly believe that that's where the translation, the need for translated literature has to begin. If literature courses start out by exposing our students to the other literatures of India as faithfully as it does to the literatures of the world, people will be used to the idea of reading translations. So we need it there. Secondly, do publishers need it? I live in Delhi, which is the center of Indian publishing. And the big ambition for most publishers, not unexpectedly, is to discover the next big author, the next big, if they want to do a commercial author, they want to do the next big J.K. Rowling, or if they want to find a literary author, they want to find the next big Murakami, for example. Right. Okay? So, and where do they look? They look for people who are writing in English. If our publishers actually realize that they can turn much more to literature that already exists and that is being written in the other Indian languages, they'll have a huge wealth to dip into. Now, I sound like they're not doing it, but the happy news for all of you is that it has actually begun in right earnest. I mean, I'm bringing you practical information. The major publishers in English now have set up specialized translation divisions, editors who are dedicated to producing translations. And if you look at their catalogs, you'll find that some 20 to 25% of their titles now are translations of Indian writing. Because of a certain historical accident, Bengali tended to be the most represented language in translations. The accident simply being because of the fact that most editors were Bengali and they knew that language well. But now you have a real flow, you have a hosepipe of translations coming in from Tamil, from Kannada, from Malayalam. There's a big thrust on Malayalam literature, and some of it is top class, absolutely top class. There's a lot more of Hindi being translated. There's a lot more of, Professor Naik's translation of Fakir Senapati's book continues to be a modern classic. And so there is great awareness now that translation is required simply in order for publishers to produce a great body of work. Almost on a daily basis, I get email from at least half a dozen people saying, we'd like to translate, how do we go about it? And nothing could be better than that. Yes, we need translation schools, we need perhaps courses that allow people to learn how to translate. I'm not talking translation theory, but practice. We could do with networking of translators, a community of translators. We are meeting now after about 2 years. And yet we should actually have been meeting once every 6 months or so, at the very least. But these meetings don't happen. So we are getting there. Things are now picking up pace. And I'm fairly sure that within the next 3 years, translation is going to be center stage in India's publishing program. I'm very, very positive about this because I can see that's what's happening. I mean, the publishers are very strongly looking in this direction. I really believe that translators should be transparent to readers. It doesn't matter if readers don't know the translators' names. How many of you know Marquez's translators' names? Anybody? No one here knows the names of Gregory Rabassa, yes, who was, oh yes, or Edith Grossman. It doesn't matter really. Well, no, you'd be surprised. Not many people know. But I'm personally, as a translator, I'm happy about that. Let people discover the original writer through the translations. We've read Dostoevsky, we've read Marquez, we've read Kundera, we've read Murakami. That's who we've read. We've not read their translators. We've read them. Our perception of their work is as the translators have brought them, but that's fine. That the translator is a mirror, is a window. Where translators do not need to be transparent is to publishers. Publishers need to know who the translators are, whom to commission for what kind of work, and how to get more work out of them. That's important. Now, both of you may differ from me on this subject, but that's just my viewpoint, yes.
No, I think what is probably not properly appreciated is that this is a very complex activity. Now, of late, there's been a kind of dogma has been spreading out in this state at least, that if you're translating, you should have a team of people, and one of them should be a native speaker of the language, you see, because readability seems to be the highest criteria. Your text must read like a good English text, you see. Now, that was what I believed at first, but now I realize that readability is much less important to me at this moment than really being able to grapple with the complexities of the source culture. Translation is more an exercise in cultural understanding and appreciation than linguistic, at the purely linguistic level. You see? And there is, I now realize there is a kind of dialectic that is going on there. Between the purely linguistic level and the cultural level. See, now you may be very faithful to the original at the linguistic level, but the more you come closer to be producing a good English text, the further away you are getting from the culture, the particular texture, the particular flavor that the original text had in Odia. See? And to me, that is probably the more challenging, the more important thing. If you render translation into an anonymous kind of activity, nameless, faceless kind of thing, the danger is that not many people would. I wouldn't like to be just a drawer of water and a hewer of wood. You see, I think I'm doing something which requires a lot of skill, and I certainly want to be appreciated for that.
There will be, I hope, many of our breed. It doesn't matter what word you use for us, professional or not. The point is, we can mangle the reputation of the original writer by doing a bad job. It's not about fidelity. It's just that if you do a bad translation, that's it. You've killed the reputation of the writer. In fact, again, this is a contentious statement I'm about to make. Tagore was his own worst translator. He effectively killed his own reputation with many readers, by translating himself into English. So translators have a great responsibility in that sense. And I don't foresee a situation where it will become a backroom industry. No, that's not going to happen, not where art is concerned. In an ideal situation, there should be zero tolerance for losing originality and zero loss of originality. That is what we strive for. Whether we succeed or not is open to many interpretations. But no translator starts out saying, I'm going to distort 20% of the original text. Right? We all start out with an intent of 100% fidelity. What does fidelity mean? That's the question. How do you interpret the word fidelity? Is it being true to the voice, the spirit, the cultural entirety, the cultural integrity, the words, the rhythm, the text? There are many things. In fact, I would argue that a translator's job is much, much tougher than the original writers, because the writer can write whatever he or she pleases. The translator cannot. Right? The translator has to write what the writer wrote and write it in a different language. No, it's one can get into sophisticated arguments on this, because, for example, two people have two different takeouts from the same text. So there is never any fidelity. By the time a work is being read by a reader, the reader has already been unfaithful to it, because he is interpreting it in a different way, right? So, you hear many versions of a song, don't you? You can enjoy each of them without necessarily saying one is unfaithful. So just think of it that way.
Every translator will have a slightly different interpretation. All translation is basically interpretation, both of the culture and the language.